welcome back to the Illicit Index channel as we bring you the concluding part of Africa's conflict minerals, a blessing or a curse. If the first part opened your eyes to the cost and realities of our shift towards green energy, this part is poised to set your minds asking deep questions. Let's dive in.
In a region where the average citizen survives on less than $2 a day, this microeconomy keeps entire extended families fed, clothed, and housed. This reality creates a complex ethical trap for global consumers. While human rights organizations frequently call for boycotts of minerals touched by artisanal labor, sweeping embargoes often backfire. Abruptly cutting off artisanal supply lines doesn't fix the safety hazards. It simply starves the millions of vulnerable families who rely on the pits as their only lifeline between survival and starvation. The Cobalt question, the electric vehicle boom, and the Cobalt paradox. The global transition toward green energy has fundamentally shifted geopolitics, turning cobalt into one of the most strategically contested commodities on Earth. Cobalt acts as a thermal stabilizer in the lithium-ion batteries that power electric vehicles, EVs. Without it, battery cathodes are highly prone to overheating, degradation, and catching fire. Because the Democratic Republic of the Congo produces over 70% of the world's cobalt supply, virtually every major automotive brand is tethered to the mineral wealth of the Congolese copper belt. This reality has sparked an intense conflict between the race for a zero-emission future and the human rights abuses occurring at the very beginning of the supply chain. The reality of blood cobalt. Comprehensive field investigations by Amnesty International and the corporate watchdog RCS Global have repeatedly exposed the brutal conditions underlying the informal artisanal sector. Landmark human rights indices estimate that up to 40,000 children work in and around informal cobalt mines in the southern provinces of Lualaba and Haut-Katanga. Children as young as 6 years old are used to sort ore, wash tailings in toxic rivers, and carry heavy sacks under intense heat for less than $1 to $2 a day. Hand-separating cobalt exposes children and pregnant women to heavy metal dust. Continuous inhalation causes hard metal lung disease, a form of progressive, irreversible pulmonary fibrosis, as well as severe skin lesions and a high rate of birth defects in mining towns. Blood gold in the Sahel. Unlike bulky copper or highly regulated cobalt, a single backpack of unrefined gold can easily carry a value of $50,000 or more. When applied to the Central Sahel, specifically the tri-border region of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, often referred to as the Liptako-Gourma region, the reality on the ground plays out through specific armed groups, clear smuggling pipelines, and staggering dollar figures. Across the Sahel, the illicit gold trade has become a major source of funding for violent extremist organizations. Competing armed groups have embedded themselves within key mining regions, where they exert control over local communities, regulate access to mining sites, and profit from the extraction and movement of gold. By taxing miners, traders, and transport routes, these organizations have transformed artisanal gold mining into a lucrative revenue stream that helps sustain their operations and expand their influence across vast stretches of territory. These groups embed themselves within the region's massive artisanal and small-scale gold mining (ASM) sector, which employs an estimated 1.8 million people across the Sahel. They generate revenue through two main tactics: violent takeovers and mafia-style strategic governance. They grab the minerals or govern the locals, imposing taxes and levies. Turning bullion into battlefield power, the autonomy provided by gold has profoundly altered the geopolitical landscape of the Sahel. The transition of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger into military-led juntas, now united as the Alliance of Sahel States, has coincided with their exit from the regional ECOWAS bloc, driven in part by a reliance on local mineral wealth over external Western or regional aid. The immediate logistical benefits for the insurgencies include unvetted logistics. Artisanal mining operations naturally require heavy use of commercial explosives like ammonium nitrate and blasting caps. By dominating the mines, extremist groups secure an endless supply of components for improvised explosive devices, IEDs, without triggering international arms tracking alarms. Local recruitment power. In regions suffering from severe climate degradation and poverty, an extremist group that controls a gold mine controls the local economy. They can offer young men protection, access to a mining pit, or steady cash wages that completely dwarf what the local agricultural sector or a weakened central government can provide. The shift is clear. Gold has evolved from a simple commodity into a sovereign-level funding mechanism that allows armed networks to sustain high-tempo insurgencies independently of foreign state sponsors. The environmental cost. The environmental and public health reality of illegal gold mining, known locally in Ghana as galamsey, derived from gather them and sell, presents a systemic national emergency. Driven by surging global gold prices, this shadow industry has evolved from low-tech panning into highly mechanized, disruptive operations that threaten the country's baseline survival. 1. The death of major river systems. Artisanal miners use heavy earth-moving equipment to dig up riverbeds and rely heavily on mercury and cyanide to separate gold from the excavated ore. The toxic runoff drains directly into the country's primary freshwater sources. The Big Three Rivers. Rivers like the Pra and Cobra and Birim, which once supplied drinking water, irrigation, and fish to millions of Ghanaians, have effectively been turned into thick, toxic, muddy brown sludge. Environmental protection assessments estimate that up to 60% of Ghana's water bodies are heavily polluted. The estuary threat. Research on the Ankobra estuary has revealed that heavy metal contamination in river sediments drastically exceeds ecological risk thresholds. Mercury and lead levels in both the water and local fish species, like the African river catfish, have surged far past safety guidelines set by global environmental agencies, destroying aquatic ecosystems and poisoning local food chains, squeezing public infrastructure and the water shortage warning. The physical destruction of the rivers has created an unprecedented economic burden on utility infrastructure. Treatment facilities shutting down. The Ghana Water Company Limited, GWCL, has faced massive spikes in water turbidity, muddiness. Treatment plants, such as the Kwanyako Headworks, have been forced to shut down temporarily because the water entering the facilities contains heavy chemical loads and mud that standard filtration systems cannot process. To make water remotely drinkable, treatment plants must use unprecedented quantities of expensive purifying chemicals, driving up utility costs and straining national budgets. Water management authorities have issued a stark warning. If galamsey continues unchecked, the sheer lack of treatable surface water could force Ghana, a country naturally rich in water resources, to import potable water. The collapse of the cocoa belt and food security galamsey does not just sit in the water. It aggressively swallows up prime agricultural land. Ghana is the world's second largest producer of cocoa, but its agricultural backbone is fracturing. Ghana's historical forest cover versus current estimates. Cocoa farmland decimation. Attracted by quick cash payouts from illegal mining syndicates, local landowners and chiefs have increasingly leased out arable land. Data tracked by agricultural institutions shows that over 19,000 hectares of fertile cocoa farmlands have been completely excavated, stripped of topsoil, and left as barren, toxic open pits. Encroachment on forest reserves. The destruction has penetrated deep into protected territory. Illicit operations have infiltrated at least 34 of the country's 288 designated forest reserves, decimating thousands of hectares of ancient forest cover, speeding up local climate degradation, and leaving behind landscape scars that will take generations to naturally reforest. The rising public health toll. The human cost of this pollution is triggering a long-term medical crisis across mining host communities. Joint EPA and Pure Earth Environmental Health Study. Soil testing in gold mining regions revealed localized mercury contamination, reaching levels up to 134 times higher than established international safety limits. The clinical consequences of this heavy metal exposure have broken out across generations. Pediatric and neurological damage. Healthcare workers and child health advocacy groups, including the Pediatric Society of Ghana, have reported a deeply concerning rise in children from mining zones suffering from severe kidney disorders and developmental delays. Pediatricians have even recorded cases of children with visible mercury pellets in their bodies due to accidental ingestion or contaminated dust inhalation, The food chain toxin. Because mercury bioaccumulates, it travels from the soil into staple crops and local fish populations. This creates a silent, long-term health crisis. Chronic kidney disease, neurological conditions, and congenital malformations are steadily rising in communities far downstream from where the actual mining takes place. Following the money. The journey of a conflict mineral from an earth pit to a consumer's smartphone or jewelry piece is a masterclass in deliberate structural obscurity. Because tin, tungsten, tantalum, and gold, collectively known as 3TG, are physically melted and blended during processing, the supply chain functions less like a transparent pipeline and more like a river system, where countless muddy streams converge into a single, clean reservoir, completely erasing the identity of the sources. Tracing these profits is a multi-layered challenge that breaks down across 6 distinct, highly vulnerable nodes. The 3TG supply chain. Micro steps to total obscurity commerce. Local artisanal miners. The extractive node. The chain begins at informal, non-industrial mine sites. Artisanal and small-scale mining, ASM. The reality, millions of wildcat miners dig using basic hand tools in remote, ungoverned territories like Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, or the Sahel. The risk? Because these workers operate entirely outside the formal banking system, they are paid strictly in physical cash. This informal environment allows armed rebel groups or corrupt military factions to easily extort protection taxes at the pithead without leaving a single digital footprint, the first obscurity layer. Once raw ore or unrefined gold flakes leave the pit, they pass through a network of local buyers known regionally as negociants. Middlemen travel between isolated jungle mines and regional trading towns, buying small batches of minerals from dozens of different pits. At this stage, minerals extracted from a mine controlled by a sanctioned warlord are physically thrown into the same sacks as minerals from a peaceful, cooperative mine. The distinct physical origin of the conflict mineral is effectively lost in the transaction. Transporters, the cross-border smuggling node, minerals must be moved from local trading towns to major cities, ports, or neighboring international borders. High-value, low-bulk minerals like gold or coltan are heavily transportable via hand luggage, hidden vehicle compartments, or small boats traversing porous borders, such as smuggling gold across the Lake Kivu border from the DRC into Rwanda or Uganda. Armed groups and corrupt customs officials secure lucrative payoffs at transit choke points. Transporters falsify logbooks or bribe local police, meaning the transit route itself becomes a mechanism for stripping away the mineral's geographical history. Export companies, the paperwork laundering node. Before leaving the continent, minerals hit trading houses and formal export companies, often called comptoirs. These entities are responsible for securing export certificates and declaring the goods to national ministries. This is where systematic fraud occurs. Through transfer pricing, under-invoicing, or outright bribery, illicit minerals are issued fraudulent certificates of origin. Conflict gold from the DRC, for instance, is routinely logged as domestically mined Ugandan or Rwandan gold before being legally flown out to international hubs. International refiners and smelters, the point of no return. This is the ultimate choke point of the global supply chain. For gold, it means major refineries in locations like Dubai, Switzerland, or India. For tin and tantalum, it means smelters in East Asia. Refiners take raw, impure mineral concentrates, or doré bars from various global suppliers, and melt them down into high-purity industrial metals or bullion. Once conflict minerals enter a furnace and are melted together with recycled scrap and legally certified material, all chemical and physical traceability is permanently destroyed. The resulting output is chemically identical, certified conflict-free by default, and stamped with the refiner's own legitimate seal. Can conflict minerals be eliminated? The global framework to sever the link between mineral wealth and armed conflict has evolved into a highly institutionalized compliance network. Governments, industry groups, and civil society have erected an intricate apparatus of laws and tracking tools. Yet, the fundamental obstacle remains unchanged. Transparency is fighting against an agile, multi-billion-dollar illicit shadow market that adapts faster than international regulations can be written. The defensive architecture, regulatory and traceability tools. To corner the illicit trade, international bodies have deployed a mix of hard law, corporate reporting, and physical mine site verification. Due diligence and corporate reporting regulations. The global framework. Global enforcement centers primarily around two major regulatory pillars: Section 1502 of the U.S. Dodd-Frank Act and the EU Conflict Minerals Regulation. These laws require Western companies to map their supply chains using the OECD due diligence guidance, a standardized 5-step framework requiring corporate policies, risk assessments, independent third-party audits, and public disclosures. Regulatory reach has expanded beyond strict conflict zones. Frameworks like the EU Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive legally hold large enterprises accountable for environmental degradation and labor abuses throughout their entire global upstream supply chain, moving past the narrow focus on armed groups. Supply chain certification and traceability initiatives. The bag and tag system. In the African Great Lakes region, the ITSCI, International Tin Association Supply Chain Initiative, has long acted as the frontline traceability system for 3T minerals: tin, tantalum, tungsten. It relies on physical plastic, barcoded tags attached to mineral sacks at the pithead by local mining authorities, tracking the ore down to regional exporters. Standardized corporate audits. At the processing choke point, the Responsible Minerals Initiative, RMI, operates the Responsible Minerals Assurance Process, RMAP. The RMI audits international smelters and refiners, validating that they are filtering out uncertified materials. In a significant regulatory milestone, the European Commission officially recognized the RMAP scheme as equivalent to EU legal requirements, standardizing how global manufacturers screen out conflict components. The persistent failure points. How illicit networks adapt. Despite these extensive tracking networks, criminal syndicates, corrupt military networks, and insurgent groups continuously exploit systemic design flaws within these transparency mechanisms. Tag, fraud, and laundering. Physical tracing schemes are highly vulnerable to localized corruption. Multi-year investigative audits and UN Group of Experts reports have revealed deep systemic flaws in the bag and tag infrastructure. Tag smuggling. Legitimate certified plastic tags are regularly stolen or sold by corrupt officials, smuggled across borders into conflict zones like Eastern DRC, and affixed to blood minerals extracted from uncertified, militia-controlled pits. Paperwork blending. Once tagged, conflict minerals are mixed into clean regional stockpiles. The flawed paperwork turns the illicit mineral clean before it ever arrives at an international port, rendering downstream corporate due diligence structurally blind to the fraud. Smuggling geographies and route evolution. When legal restrictions tighten in one transit country, illicit supply lines adapt immediately by rerouting the cargo through areas of least resistance. And when direct flights out of primary transit hubs face intense international scrutiny or sanctions, smuggling syndicates shift to regional maritime corridors. Conflict gold and minerals are quietly transported via truck or small boat to neighboring regional coastal hubs, such as Togo, Uganda, or Rwanda, where the materials are falsely declared as domestic production, repackaged, and cleanly exported to the international bullion and mineral markets of Dubai or East Asia. The future: transparency versus convenience. The trajectory of conflict mineral regulation ultimately rests on structural economic incentives. The demand for 3TG and critical minerals is projected to explode over the coming decades to satisfy the global energy transition, AI computing architecture, and military-industrial bases. As long as clean, verified supply chains carry high operational costs and slower turnaround times, the global market faces a persistent temptation to prioritize convenience over complete traceability. True progress will depend on moving beyond paper-thin documentation checks toward immutable tracking technologies, combined with an unyielding international political willingness to aggressively penalize and cut off the global refining hubs that benefit from laundering illicit. The story of conflict minerals is not just an African story. It is a global story. The minerals extracted in eastern Congo power phones in London. The gold mined in remote regions may end up in financial markets in New York. The cobalt extracted by artisanal miners may power electric vehicles in Beijing. The world is connected by supply chains, and supply chains carry consequences. The question facing the 21st century is whether the technologies designed to build a better future can be separated from the conflicts that help supply them. Because the true cost of a mineral is not determined by its market price. It is determined by the human lives, communities, and futures sacrificed to bring it to market. Do you believe Africa's vast mineral wealth is a blessing, a curse, or something in between? We'd love to hear your perspective. Leave a comment and tell us your thoughts. Don't let the conversation end here. Take just a few seconds to subscribe to the Illicit Index. Every subscription tells YouTube that this story matters, helping this documentary reach more people around the world. The more people who understand the hidden cost behind the minerals powering our modern lives, the greater the chance of inspiring informed conversations and meaningful change. Thank you for watching, and remember, behind every resource lies a story. At the Illicit Index, we're committed to uncovering the stories others overlook. We'll see you in the next investigation.